The foreign ministers of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have just signed a peace deal in Washington that they hope will bring an end to a decades-long conflict. Rwanda is accused of funding M23 rebels, one of the largest of over 100 militant groups involved in heavy fighting that has torn apart eastern Congo. The peace deal brokered by the Trump administration will also help the U.S. government and American companies gain access to critical minerals in the region. Well, Kambale Musavuli is a human rights activist from the DRC and an analyst with the Center for Research on Congo-Kinshasa. And I asked him how optimistic he is that this peace deal will hold.
We do not know the content of the deal itself, right? So it makes it hard to even have an analysis based on leaked information. For the Congolese people, we believe that any peace agreement that deals with the DRC, if it does not include the clause of justice, we risk having the same impact as you mentioned. No, this is not the first time there have been peace accords signed, be it with rebels or with regional leaders, Rwanda and Uganda. And the reason why they have failed in the past is because of the question of providing amnesty to those who committed crimes. So I'm clear that until we really know the content and see if justice is included, then we will know if it can actually bring about peace and stability to the DRC.
But you think if it does not contain this clause of justice, that this deal has no chance of having a lasting impact? And perhaps you could just remind our viewers exactly what you're referring to here.
Yes, I mean, since 1996, the DRC has known a conflict that has taken the lives of over 6 million Congolese. It's been caused by the invasions of two of Congo's neighbors, Rwanda and Uganda. They have invaded the Congo twice in 96 and 98, and they continue to support proxy rebel militias. As you notice, when we speak about the Congo, we speak about rebel groups. By the signing of the agreement that just took place in Washington today, it was the Rwandan foreign minister signing the deal. So it's very clear of the impact of Rwanda supporting rebels in the DRC. They've asked them to remove their 7,000 troops out of the DRC, who are actively supporting the M23 rebels. But in the past agreement, what has unfolded is that the rebels, right, who have committed crimes are usually rewarded with government position, are even rewarded with integration into the Congolese army. So what it does is that it creates an impression that when you commit the crimes, you are rewarded. So the rebels of yesterday are still the one active today. One of the commanders of the M23, Sultani Makenga, who has been active since 1996, have committed multiple mutiny. And then the crimes documented in the UN Group of Expert report shows the mass graves, the mass killings in the region committed by his troops, and whereby he just keep being rewarded. So if we're not holding the perpetrator of violence accountable, be it the rebels themselves, be it those who are in illicit trade, we only say that what's most important is to get access to the minerals. And I think that's the message that the US is sending to the Congolese, and we are very shocked that after 29 years of conflict, the US is more interested in having a minerals deal for peace and stability rather than holding the perpetrator of violence. For the Congolese people,
can I just jump in to ask, do you think that that is the main reason why the United States has been so interested in brokering this deal, because Congo is so rich in rare minerals?
Absolutely. I mean, the Trump administration became very active on the situation in the Congo when the administration was approached by the advisor to the president, the Congolese president, particularly Beya. Before that, I think for the American audience, they know that Trump spoke about the Congo negatively. They would say things as Congolese refugees coming into the U.S. Criminals. And there was even one time when he was asked about the Congo, he seemed to not know how to respond to that question. But now Trump has become an expert on the Congo, even hinting that he should get a Nobel Peace Prize for what he's doing in DRC and other parts of the world, right? So we know that the interest, even in the language, from Secretary Rubio to the advisor Bullos, and even for Trump, is that they will have access to billions of dollars of mineral resources. That's on the US side, but it's important to include the Congolese voice. I hope the world knows that on the ground, Congolese in the civil society organization and all across the country, even the miners in the Katanga province, have already called out this deal. It's saying that it did not include consultation of the people. This did not go into the Parliament of the Congo, the Senate. There was never a consultation of the Congolese to give away billions of dollars of our minerals. And that reminds us so much of the so-called Berlin Conference, where Africans saw the continent carved up and Congo given to King Leopold for the mineral resources. In 2025, we are witnessing again the control of Congo's mineral wealth for the fourth industrial revolution that's making modern-day technology function without the voice of the Congolese. The Congolese are not engaged in that process. We're just finding out that the US is going to get that. So it's important to know that the Congolese are not in support of that, and that for us, peace can only come through justice. And if it's not included, peace will be elusive for years to come.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your voice on this today. We've been speaking with Kambale Musavuli in Ghana. We very much appreciate your time.
Riven by conflict for decades, violence here in the Democratic Republic of the Congo escalated at the start of the year, plunging the region into deeper chaos. The rebel group M23, which the UN say is backed by Rwanda, intensified their bloody campaign against Congolese forces in the DRC. As rebel forces approached Goma, the largest city in the region, thousands of civilians desperately fled. Hospitals were overwhelmed with patients injured in the violence. The city soon fell to the M23 rebels after Congolese forces made a rapid retreat. But the central government stood firm against the takeover. Rwanda's defense forces are supporting their M23 puppets by continuing their terrorist enterprise on our territory, sowing terror and desolation among our population. I share your pain and indignation at these barbaric attacks.
Je partage avec vous la douleur et l'indignation face à ces attaques barbares.
The rebels continued their offensive. As they approached the city of Bukavu, around 200 kilometers to the south of Goma, it descended into chaos, with widespread looting of food depots and other facilities. By mid-February, the M23 rebels had captured the city, with scenes reminiscent of Goma just weeks earlier. Amid the fear and chaos, some residents appeared to welcome the rebel forces. The wave of further violence caused more displacement. The UN estimates that between 10 and 15,000 people fled to neighbouring Burundi. As the violence abated, the loss of life began to emerge. The Red Cross discovered scores killed in the fighting and was forced to bury many of them in mass graves. An estimated 7,000 people were killed, and the UN is investigating claims of war crimes, including sexual violence. After many initiatives, a ceasefire mediated by the US and Qatar came to fruition. But with disarmament, the integration of non-state armed groups, and the return of many displaced people to follow, the road ahead is long.
Well, I'm joined now by Christian-Geraud Neema. He's a non-resident scholar in the Carnegie Africa Program, and he joins us now from Port Louis in Mauritius. Mr. Neema, it's good to have you with us. We just heard the road ahead is long. How confident are you that this deal will bring lasting peace?
Dren, thank you for having me in this interview. Yes, the road is very long. The road is very long to get to a lasting peace after this agreement that's going to be signed. Because let's remember, it's not the first agreement that both countries are signing about peace. We had numerous agreements in the past, and yet a few years back, we still found ourselves in this situation right now. I think it's going to take much more than this agreement to get to a lasting peace in the region, because we're going to have to take into account the internal situation situation inside of the DRC, the complex issues that led those kind of situations to be possible. Treating the Rwanda's backing of M23 is one of the issues, but many issues are still have to be addressed, and this agreement is not addressing those issues. And I do believe that those issues still going to become a much of a problem later on because we have to address them. Otherwise, the road to peace is still a very long one before getting to that.
You know, you bring up a point about critics have raised concerns over the lack of clarity in this agreement. Can you give us an idea of what's inside and what is not?
So far, we have a lot of rumors about what's inside the agreement. We have the agreement. We had disagreement about whether or not Rwanda is going to be named into their core in a sense where it's going to withdraw its troop. And the information that we got right now is the idea that Rwanda is going to be asked to leave the DRC. This is one thing that President Tshisekedi wanted to get from the agreement. Let's remember that that's why he called upon the US to leverage its influence over Rwanda to be able to get the Rwanda to stop its backing of the M23. But other issues are still remaining. The issue about DRC armed group, of course, they're mentioning the integration of those armed groups, but those armed groups integration is not the solution because we had that in the past as well, and even that it's also failed over the years. So we have to address much more issues, much more complex issues that are not named in this agreement that I do believe that that's going to become a problem later on. And let's not forget that there's not really much of a willingness to see economic integration happening because in the DRC side, there was a feeling that having an economic integration with Rwanda is like rewarding Rwanda's expansion behavior in the eastern part of the DRC.
Yeah, there's not a big willingness for a lot of economic cooperation. You know, that speaks to the fact that this conflict has been going on for such a long time. For outsiders, tell us, why are Rwanda and Congo, why are they ready to give in and close the deal now?
One of the main factors in this situation is the fact that the U.S. intervened. Let's remember that in February, President Tshisekedi called on the U.S., offering an economic incentive to the U.S. to intervene into the conflict. And because of the U.S. has an enormous leverage over Rwanda's economic and political landscape, also in the DRC is the same situation. The U.S. has been able with Qatar to get the DRC and Rwanda to talk. This is one thing. This is one part of the problem. The other part of the problem will be how much the U.S. will be invested into following up for the longer term that this agreement is implemented. And this is going to be one of the main issue of this agreement, a political commitment for a long-term follow-up that the agreement is implemented. So far, it's still too early to say because, let's face it, this conflict is not really high in priority in Washington, D.C. because there are much more bigger issues that's captivating U.S. administration.
That is true what you say, but also we know that Congo, particularly the east, which is held by the M23 rebels, that area is rich in rare earth minerals. And we know the United States wants it to get as many sources of that as possible. Do you think that's why the United States is so interested in brokering the peace deal? And do you think, can that guarantee a U.S. commitment for the long term?
Of course, it's one of the elements on the table, but I don't want to get into the details, but the U.S. is more interested by the heavy rare earth minerals that are produced by China. Eastern part of the DRC is producing light earth minerals. In regards to that, we may not have as much as incentive. Of course, DRC is producing other minerals that can still be interesting to the U.S. But in terms of like how much important rare earth that are produced in the eastern part of the DRC are important to the U.S., it's not much as important. But you have U.S. companies that are interested in investing in eastern part of the DRC. Those companies can play a role into incentivizing the U.S. administration to be present and following up on that. Okay. But when we look into the balance, I think that we should not be overplaying the DRC's eastern part of importance to the U.S. administration right now. We should be safe. We should be prudent into looking into that.
Christian-Geraud Neema from the Carnegie Africa Program, we appreciate your time and giving us valuable context into this story. Thank you.